Our opening words were written by Anne Slater. The Persian poet Rumi challenges us. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. And we come from rich heritages of liturgy and pomp. We come from burning legacies of angry gods and threats of hellfire. We come just as we are. We come with exuberant and joyful hearts, eager to witness to others. We come bereft of the goodness of life, wondering, hesitant. We come just as we are. We come in the bloom of youth, ready to explore new truths. We come ready to sit apart from our children and be nourished for an hour. We come with gray in our hair and experiences to share. We come just as we are. We come to the place we never knew before was home. We come to the place that has been home for most of our lives. We come just as we are to join our brothers and sisters as members of one family in this beloved home, our hands and hearts outstretched. Come yet again, come. Jan will light our chalice this morning. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope as a sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together. Before we sing the first hymn, let me remind you to leave yourselves muted. However, we want you and whoever is with you to sing with Jan and Mary as big and loud as you like. Make it a joyous experience. So let's sing the opening hymn, Wake Now My Senses, number 298.
Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in awe. Keep with the web of creation your vow. Giving, receiving as love shows us how. Wake now my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and grace the sublime. Wake now, compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take as your neighbor, both stranger and friend. Praying and striving their hardship to end. Wake now my conscience, with justice thy guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted a privileged place. God's love embraces the whole human race. Wake now my vision of ministry clear. Brighten my pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Work toward a planet transformed by our care.
Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist community of Cambria. We are glad you have joined us this morning. As a Unitarian Universalist community, we celebrate religious diversity and welcome all who journey in search of faith and spirituality. The UUCC is a lay-led congregation inviting speakers from different religious traditions and spiritual or scientific backgrounds to speak in our pulpit.
Andy, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm afraid we can barely hear Janet. The sound has faded away again.
We encourage presentations covering a variety of topics and areas of interest to our community that connect with the UU 7 principles. Is that better? Today's service centers around principles 3 and 4. The third principle, we affirm and promote acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. Spiritual growth isn't about a vertical ascent to heaven, but about growth in every dimension at once. It's spirituality in 3D. Growth in spirit doesn't measure one's proximity to a God above, but rather the spaciousness of one's own soul, its volume, its capacity, its size. We need souls that can take in the world in all its complexity and diversity, yet still maintain our integrity. And we need souls that can love and be in relationship with all of this complexity. Instead of fight or flight, we need a spiritual posture of embrace. The fourth principle, we affirm and promote a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. As responsible religious seekers, we recognize that we are privileged to be free, to have resources to pursue life beyond mere survival, to continually search for truth and meaning, to exist beyond bonds of dogma and oppression, and to wrestle freely with truth and meaning as they evolve. My name is Janet Cooper, and I'm your worship associate this morning. I would like to extend a special welcome to today's guests and visitors. We're glad you joined us this morning under these challenging circumstances. If you are not on our mailing list, please visit our website at uuccambria.org so that we can keep you informed about all of our activities. And a reminder, if you wish to see this or any of our past Zoom services again, recordings of these services can be found on the UUCC website and Facebook as well. The membership committee invites non-members to consider becoming a member of our community. Please contact me or a board member if you are interested. So again, good morning and welcome to everyone. Let us now sing the affirmation.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help, and to help, and to help one another.
We set aside this time for any short announcements that would be of interest to our UU community members and friends. Please keep your items short and to the point. For any items that need more explanation, please call or email the person after the service to be respectful of everyone's time. If you have an announcement, please raise your hand by clicking on the raise hand button near the lower right of your participants window. When Susan calls your name, click the unmute me button near the lower left of the participants window, then speak.
Lou, would you please unmute yourself and make your announcement?
The first announcement is we again can't hear Janet. I don't know what the problem is with the volume, but if she had called on me, I wouldn't have been able to hear her. Anyway, tomorrow is men's group at 10 o'clock by Zoom.
Thank you, Lou. And I have to say that we are experiencing the sound going up and down this morning for some strange reason we have not figured out. Catherine, if you would unmute yourself and make your announcement, please.
Okay, thank you. Just want to thank everybody for their donations of used blankets, jackets, scarves, and socks. Hoping to get some new socks But I really appreciate that you brought them to me clean, and we're going to continue to collect until about the second week of October, and then we're going to begin the distribution. So thanks so much, and just email me or give me a call if you have something for me to pick up.
Thank you, Kat. Randy, would you please unmute yourself and make your announcement?
Hi. The amended bylaws has now been approved for a vote by the congregation. So this November at the membership meeting, you'll have a chance to vote on the amended bylaws for adoption. And in case you're wondering what's going on with them, the amended bylaws with a comparison analysis of the current amendment versus the current bylaws has been provided to each of the members to look over, and I will be hosting a Q&A session after the October 18th service. So after that service, I'll answer questions about the bylaw amendments. And then the second announcement I have is regarding the Zoomification of our sanctuary. We are presently in stage 2, where you see that we have the sanctuary set up as a studio. But in order to have people come back in person when the time comes, we need to put the sanctuary back to its normal state. And that means we have to either stop Zooming or reconstruct the Zooming to incorporate it into the sanctuary itself, so it'll be seamless. And we can continue Zooming our services forever and ever, but that will take some money, and we're looking for donors to help fund that effort. And so if you are interested, please come forward and either talk to me or Janet or a board member. Anyway, there'll be an article in the newsletter this Tuesday night further describing that whole business and what's involved in all the details. So please, if you can, help out with this effort. Thank you.
And I guess the other announcement I would make is that in order to hear the service, as long as we're having these issues, each individual participant will probably just need to keep fooling around with their volume controls. When the sanctuary fades away, turn your volume up, and when it comes back, turn it back down. That's the only thing I can suggest at the moment.
Oh.
So Randy, go ahead.
Yeah. One more thing regarding that last bit about the Zoom or setting up the sanctuary. This business of the sound will absolutely go away. If you remember Elizabeth's talk, she had a beautiful microphone in front of her. We will have sound like that as well. So that's part of the effort. So this, what we're experiencing today, will never occur again. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Randy. And thank you everyone for sharing those announcements.
Thank you. Next week, we will experience a Sunday with Timber Hawkeye. We take this time to celebrate all those who are having a birthday this month. Birthdays are a special moment. It is the time when you feel as if the world is taking a moment to invite you into being, just like it was on your first birthday. If you have a birthday this month, please raise your blue hand. When Susan calls your name, unmute yourself and please tell us your special date.
Susan, you're muted.
Nancy, I was watching. Nancy and Robert's hand went up and went back down.
Oh.
Does one of you have an October birthday?
Yes, Robert raised his hand for me. But you have an October birthday. Thank you.
Okay, and what's the date? Not the year, but the date.
Oh yeah, not the year. The 14th.
Happy birthday.
It
Rick.
was 21 years ago.
Yeah. Judy? Judy, would you unmute yourself and tell us your birth date, please?
Everything okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
No. Okay. Yes, October 22nd.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I was having technical difficulties.
No problem. And Francesca, would you please unmute yourself and announce your birth date?
October 17th.
Happy birthday to you too. And those are all of our birthdays for October. Happy birthday to all of you. Oh, we're good.
Okay. Thank you, Susan, and happy birthday to all our October birthdays. Sharing together some of our personal and significant joys and concerns brings us closer as a faith community. We invite you to share the milestones that are deeply felt as part of your personal life, but please be mindful and considerate of all who come to worship with this morning. This is a time of community building. The first reading is a quote based on the writings of F. Scott Fitzgerald and will be read by Dr. Stephen Lloyd Moffat.
All right. For what it's worth, it's never too late, or in my case, too early, to be whoever you want to be. There's no time limit. Start whenever you want. You can change or stay the same. There are no rules to this thing. We can make the best or the worst of it. I hope you make the best of it. I hope you see things that startle you. I hope you feel things you've never felt before. I hope you meet people who have a different point of view. I hope you live a life you're proud of. And if you're not, I hope you have the courage to start all over again.
Let us enter a place of peace and serenity where you're one with your spiritual being. Be at peace within your space where the absence of all that is temporal is its most cherished gift. Let us enter the stillness. Please come back now. The second reading is a poem by Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken, read by Dr. Stephen Lloyd Moffat.
The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in the yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler long as I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them all really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way. I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere, ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference.
Thank you. We will now sing This Little Light of Mine, hymn 118, and I'd like to dedicate this especially to Pat and Bill Lakin. For those of you who have been with us for a while, you know Bill used to love this song and played it frequently on his ukulele for us. So thank you. Please sing as loud as you like. Count out, please. 1, 2, 3.
This little light of mine
Today's sermon, titled Gen Z Spirituality, the religious worlds of our youngest generation, will be delivered by Stephen Lloyd Moffat. Stephen Lloyd Moffat is a professor of religious studies at Cal Poly for the last 15 years, which has provided a lecture-and-eye view of first-year students who never seem to age, even as the world changes around them. He loves the UUCC and looks forward to opportunities to share religion with all sorts of open-minded folks. His latest book, The Spirit of Winemakers, Religion from the Vineyards to the Cellar, looks at spiritual winemakers around the world and will be out around Thanksgiving. He lives in an intentional community and gathering space he co-founded in the countryside outside of San Luis Obispo with his partner Amy, who is the state historian for California on the Central Coast, and their puggle, Gilbert Pierre Rougelet d'Amity. Their latest addition to the farm, a baby goat named Poppy, will have a blessing later this afternoon. Stephen?
Okay, I am guessing that Janet is finished. I couldn't quite hear all that, but can you guys hear me? You're good? Okay, so welcome to Cal Poly, welcome to class. You won't be tested on this at the end, so it's the best part of college, just getting to listen. I am in my office here at Cal Poly, and we are here to talk about all the people walking around out there. That is our youngest generation, Gen Z. Now, as I look at the faces of all you, most of you whom I know, I can see that, you know, this group has matriculated through life a bit more than those outside the door. And in a sign that maybe I am joining you, I found myself drawn to a quote the other day about the youth. It said, "Young people are high-minded because they have not yet been humbled by life, nor have they experienced the force of circumstances. They think they know everything and are always quite sure about that." Now, having taught freshmen for nearly 2 decades, I have to concur, but this quote was not by a colleague of mine. This was Aristotle in the 4th century BCE about the young people of his era. And so I think one of the most popular pastimes historically has always been fretting about, or you might even say whinging about the generations below us. In the 18th century, a writer in the venerable Town and Country magazine said the youth are self-admiring, emaciated fribbles. Now, fribbles is a great word that we should put back into our lexicon. By the 1920s, one psychologist summed up the young people of the 1920s by saying they are grossly thoughtless, rude, and utterly selfish. So the language of your pickleball court is really nothing new when it goes to speaking about Generation Z, our youngest generation. Even if they can be a little selfish, a tad thoughtless, occasionally rude, but I promise not to follow the examples of those who came before me. Even if the youth are a little self-admiring, emaciated fribbles, I'm not going to speak badly about them, I promise. But we are here to talk about the youngest generation. Now, to lay the groundwork, Gen Z are around 7 to 22 now. So you've got the greatest generation that gave way to the silent generation, which gave way to the boomers, and then my generation, Gen X. Now, my generation, Gen X, demographers couldn't find anything interesting to talk about us, and so we just became Gen X. The next generation was known originally as Gen Y, and then they came to be known as millennials. After Y, we have Gen Z, and they are waiting for a name. Jean Twenge, a great professor down at UC San Diego, thinks they should be called iGen, because her argument is this is the first generation who cannot remember a time when iPhones were not available to everything. So they are the smartphone generation. And for her, that's the defining characteristic of them. And I think it's useful to kind of understand the technology that came with each one. Boomers, they were the television generation. First when television was going big. My generation, it was the PC. Millennials, it was the internet, and Gen Z, it is the smartphone. Now, what's going on spiritually with young people? Well, the splashy headline is always, religion is becoming less important for young people. That the standard line being young people want iPads and virtual worlds, not ancient religious traditions. Religion is something for the retirement home, and the young people are moving away from it. Now, this claim of the death or decline of religion also has been made again and again. Back in 1710, Christianity would be completely gone by 1900. Thomas Jefferson said, there's not a young man living in the United States who will not die a Unitarian. Still waiting for that, but we'll add to it. We are moving from a theological and fictitious age to a truly scientific one. It just goes again and again. There is always the prediction that religion is dying and the young people are at fault. So we get to 1968, the best known sociologist, Peter Berger, says, by the 21st century, religious believers are likely to be found in small sects huddled together to resist a worldwide secular culture. And the presumption is that the religions of America were going to become like we see the ancient religions of the Greeks. That is, sweet tales we tell our children, but nobody believes in Zeus and Poseidon anymore. That they will all be recognized as simple myths that are no longer relevant. Now, given the track record of people predicting the decline of religion, we should be skeptical. But let's look at the latest claim. The latest claim to the death of religion is the rise of the nuns. Now, this is not the rise of the nuns, not N-U-N-S. This is, it's great having props in your own office. This is the rise of the N-O-N-E-S. These are people who, when pollsters ask, what religion are you affiliated with, they select no religion. So back in the 1950s, about 1% to 2% of Americans said they had no religion. That sort of steadied out around 8% throughout the 80s. In the 90s, it began to climb a little bit. But what we've seen in the last decade is a really, really high growth of people who claim no religious affiliation. Now, if these trends continue, nuns, or those who have no religious affiliation, will become the dominant group in America by around 2030, 2035. And this trend is being pushed by younger generations. So if you look at Gen Z, they are around 4 in 10 Gen Z claim no religious affiliation, 42% in the latest poll. And so you can cue the headlines. Religion is dying and young people are to blame for it. We are becoming an religiously unaffiliated nation. And those born in 2000 will be the first generation of people for whom none is the majority. And as they matriculate through life, America will become more and more secular. That is the argument. So you can cue the headline that gets people to keep their TV on. But as pundits in the 2016 election reminds us, the reality is pundits are often wrong on these things. And when you start auguring down on the numbers, something different appears. You can, claim all the headlines, millennials are ruining religion, but there's some other data that makes us pause. For example, when you just ask Americans how important is religion to your life, during the very period where you see the rise of nuns, you see almost no change in the importance of religion. You would expect if there was a lot of nuns coming into the scene, this number would decline, but it stayed relatively constant. Furthermore, when you ask the nuns, how often do you experience a sense of wonder? So you don't ask, are you religious? But you ask other questions getting about their spiritual life. And almost half of them have a sense of wonder in the universe every week. When you ask them a sense of peace and well-being, you're again at about 40% every single week. And when you even ask how important is religion to you, even though you told pollsters none, 13% of them say religion's really important to me, even though I'm not affiliated with any religion. And almost 35% say very important or somewhat important. When you look at things like belief in heaven and hell, well, millennials and Gen Z look a lot like greatest generation in things. There's not a huge amount of difference in even belief in the afterlife. When you look at other questions like thankfulness and gratitude, purpose and meaning in life, sense of spiritual being and well-being, here millennials and Gen Z look quite similar. So what is going on? If when you ask Gen Z and millennials what religion they affiliate with, they say none. But when you ask them about their spiritual lives, they don't look that different. So what's behind this shift? Well, let me mention a couple of different aspects of it. First, millennials and Gen Z hate labels. They despise this sort of label. They really think that the culture wars of the 80s and 90s pitted one self-identified group against another self-identifying group. And once you embrace a box, well, then there are somebody opposed or for that box. So the liberal box, the immigrant box, the unwed box, whatever it is, millennials and Gen Z don't want to be put in any box. And we see this all over the place. So when you ask millennials, Gen Z, are you patriotic? 57% say yes, but are you a patriot? Only 32%. If you say, do you believe in feminism? About half of millennials and Gen Z say yes. Are you a feminist though? Only 27% do it. Do you believe in capitalism? 42% say absolutely. Are you a capitalist? Only about 19%. So it seems like you want to hold beliefs without the label that's connected with them. And if you look at the diagram to the left, are you an environmentalist? Well, polls would suggest that the older you are, the more likely you're to claim to be an environmentalist. But young people are the most environmental generation by far. So what's going on here? It's because they don't want to be labeled an environmentalist. And they are so anti-label that when you ask them, are you a millennial? 2/3 of them will say no, right? Don't even put me in a box with my age. This is how label averse they are. And by the way, this is also, I think, behind Gen Z and millennials' view of gender and gender neutral pronouns. Gen Z are so much more accepted of that because for them, gender is just another label. Don't box me in. I'm not X and I'm not Y. Why do you care so much about some label? It's not about some change in biological understanding. They are just anti-label. And so what's happening here is that when pollsters ask Gen Z, what religion do you want to affiliate with? They say, don't put me in a box. Don't label me. I'm just me. I'm not Christian. I'm not non-Christian. I am just me. And I notice this a lot on our campus because obviously I teach a lot of Christians. This is Cal Poly, the most Christian campus on the West Coast for a public school. And when I ask them about their religious identity, who are you? People will say, or people used to always say, oh, I have no religious identity. I'm a Christian. And I'd be like, okay, I know what you're trying to say. But now I'm even finding more than that. The Christians don't even want to be called Christians anymore. So now they say, I am not a Christian. Jesus is just the center of my life. I'm a Jesus lover. Don't give me even the label Christian. This is a label averse generation. Second of all, they have come to distrust institutions. Institutions generally in America have fallen down in trust. Pretty much the only institution that still carries some amount of trust is the military. to some extent, maybe before the past month. The Supreme Court might have as well. But what's interesting here, when you ask millennials and Gen Z about religious institutions, as we see on the right-hand side, back in 2010, millennials, which were the only people polling there since Gen Z were too young, were the most trusting of religious churches and religious organizations. And 5 years later, they became the least trusting generation of religions. And in fact, in a poll that came out last year among Gen Z, almost half of Gen Z say they have 0% trust, or 0% trust in religious leaders. And that's worse than political leaders or the media or business. Half had 0% trust in religious leaders. And so when religion comes to be seen as an institution, Gen Z are going, no, I don't want to be identified with an institution. And so when somebody asks them, what religion do you affiliate? They hear, what institution are you a part of? And thus they stand back from that. They don't want to be affiliated with any institution. So they don't want to be labeled. They don't want to be connected with an institution. Let me mention a third area, which I'm going to do with some degree of hesitancy because it involves politics. And I know whenever you talk about politics, it could devolve into chaos or a presidential debate, which sometimes seem the same thing. But I want to do it's not to talk about politics, but to talk about one reason why Gen Z don't want to affiliate with religion. If you look at Gen Z, they are incredibly open and non-judgmental, especially in terms of gender and sexual identities. They embrace racial diversity and globalism. They're dedicated to science. They are climate change activists. Their experience with lockdown drills make them very pro-gun control. And generally speaking, they are pro-marijuana. When you look at this list of self-identified values and compare that to their perception of the Republican Party, it is hard to see how they align their values with today's Republican Party. And not surprisingly, millennials and now the first numbers on Gen Z show a sizable majority of young people identify with the Democratic Party over the Republican Party. Now, before you get too excited about that, some of you just remember young people never vote. They're never going to start voting. They say things, but they are not going to vote. They, for some reason, will tell everybody they're going to vote, but numbers suggest they probably won't vote. But this is not about politics. This is about religion. And here's the issue. For them, the Republican Party is the religious party. And so when they get asked, what religion are you affiliated with? They think, oh, I'm announcing, if I say, a religion, I'm announcing I'm Republican. And I don't want to go around my campus saying I'm a Republican. So I'm none. Now, I tread lightly on this because I think they're actually wrong. Yes, there is a general perception that Republicans are the religious party. But when you look at every single religious group in America, the majority are Democrats, other than white evangelicals, even if you break out Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses from that. And if you want to read more about this, I have an op-ed in the Tribune today on this very question. So it's the electronic version of the Tribune. Apparently, they want everybody to look at the electronic version. But it's on the cover of the SLO Tribune today. I go into more this fallacy that the Republicans are the religious party. But young people are connected with nuns because they don't want the label, they don't want to be identified with religious institutions, and they fear being connected with the Republican Party whose values are antithetical to them. So what I'm trying to point out here is that the spiritual beliefs of young people really haven't shifted that much. What shifted is their connection to religious institutions and religious labels. One way of saying this is Gen Z are believing, but they are not belonging. That is, they don't want to be connected to groups anymore. And so when facing the two paths that Robert Frost speaks about, they all want to take their own path. They all want to take the path less traveled. They want to be different. They want to be their own people, just like everybody else. But what they discover is that when you're on that road less traveled, you're by yourself. You don't have the support of people around. So when you're a believer who doesn't belong, you don't have that community to support you. And so what are the implications of this fact that spiritually young people are the same, but they don't belong to groups? Now, one thing I'll just preempt. I don't think it has any effect on morals or ethics. Study after study show your involvement in religious communities has almost no effect on your ethical or moral life. I wish that wasn't the case, but it just doesn't seem to have any measurable effect. But I think there is some part of their life that is important for us to recognize. That is, Gen Z are what sociologists call digital natives. They have spent their entire life connected to technology. 95% have a cell phone. 55% use their smartphone for 5 hours a day or more. A quarter use their smartphone for 10 hours a day. 31% of Gen Z feels uncomfortable without their phones for 30 minutes or less. 46% currently follow more than 10 influencers. So what does this mean? Well, if you burrow down into studying Gen Z, they are not on Facebook. My kids laugh when I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go on Facebook. They're like, oh, you're old, dude. Because nobody in the high school is on Facebook. Even Instagram is a little questionable for them. The one technology they are overwhelmingly connected to is YouTube. Young people watch less than an hour of TV a day because they're spending hours and hours on YouTube. 95% of Gen Z said they could not live without YouTube. And this is where they get their information from. YouTube is where you find out about stuff. Now, why is this important? Well, as I've been reading 10,000 spiritual autobiographies over the last 2 decades, a couple of years ago, for the first time, I had one that I found a little bit disturbing, and it went like this. When I was 14, I was on YouTube, and I discovered this religion. I thought it sounded really cool. Well, for the next 2 years, I spent all my time dedicated to this religion, and then my parents found out about it, and they explained to me it was a Russian cult. And so I had to spend the next year in therapy to get over it. And I was just like, oh my God, that's just so weird. Who falls for a YouTube religion? Now I have to say every single quarter I get one of those in various forms where they discover some new way of being religious on YouTube, and then they follow up and it becomes their defining thing. And here is why religious institutions, not belonging to institutions, is so important, because normally we get inundated with a whole bunch of religious ideas all the time, but we have a community to kind of check those religious ideals. We have a community who will say, the whole idea of, angels, sending roller coasters down, maybe you should rethink that one, right? That's what we do in religious communities. We help each other and encourage each other. If you are not belonging to a community, these people, young people are by themselves with their computer or smartphone, and they're like, that makes sense to me. And so you don't have that check. But there's another issue about being digital natives, and that is they spend far less time with other people generally. So this study is of teens who meet up with their friends almost every day. Oh, you can't see the bottom, but this is from the 1980s to the present. What you notice is teens spend more and more time completely alone. And being social activities is one of the things that young people have really done much less. They just don't see each other. By the way, this is one of the reasons why the average age of sex has gone up almost 1.5 years over the last decade. And it's not because of any sort of moral understanding or anything like that. In fact, if they're polled, they find less issue with premarital sex. The fact is, young people just aren't with young people ever. And not to point out the obvious, it's hard to have sexual activity if you're actually not physically with people. So it goes down. The amount of dating, 12th, 10th, and 8th graders has gone down precipitously. And as a result, you've seen a rise in loneliness. So the poll on the left is percentage of 8th, 10th, and 12th graders who agree with the statement, I often feel left out, I often feel lonely. And when you look at the loneliness indicator, the higher number, the lonelier you are, Gen Z are far and away the loneliest generation. Not only are they lonely, they have a lot of anxiety and are sad about themselves because they're always compared to the ideal on Instagram or YouTube. And so they come to feel bad about themselves because their filter to the world is the screen of Instagram and YouTube. And this has led to a rise in depression, particularly among teenage girls. You've seen way more depression and a rise in suicide rates among US teenagers. Now, these are difficult and challenging issues for teenagers separate from religion. But one of the things that being a part of religious communities does is study after study show that the more you are connected to a group of fellow religious believers, the healthier and happier you are. And what's interesting is it really doesn't even matter what religious community you're a part of. Like, it's not like Jews are happier and Muslims are less happy and Unitarians are the happiest. No, it doesn't really matter. It's the fact that you are a part of a community, being with other people together. That's what leads to health and happiness. And so if young people have the same spiritual instincts, yet they reject all the communities, what they're finding is they don't have those networks of support. They don't have those friends and family connections that come about through religious communities. And so as they struggle, they don't have the things that help you. And so Gen Z need community more than perhaps most others, but they don't know how to create community. They try through things like transformational festivals. They try through some internet groups and things like that, but they don't have that basics of religious community to support them. So to sum this up, religion is not on the decline. Young people are just like every generation, have the same spiritual instincts. What they don't want is to be labeled anything. They don't want to be connected with institutions, and they don't want to be connected to the Republican Party. So they tell pollsters, I'm not affiliated with anything. And it is true. They have the instincts, but they don't want to be affiliated. They don't want to be a part of a group. And this means that there's no group to support them. Support them when they turn on YouTube and find something strange. Support them when they matriculate through life and struggle. And this is the sad part of Gen Z, is that they need religious communities, but they are not dedicated to it. But I want to end on a happy note, because I think F. Scott Fitzgerald's quote at the beginning is ultimately one of optimism. For what it's worth, it's never too late, or in my case, too early to be whoever you want to be. There's no time limit. Start whatever you want. You can change or stay the same. There are no rules to this thing. We can make the best or the worst of it. And so young people are in that phase where they're figuring out life. They are on the path to discover the types of communities that will ultimately support them, because they want it. They just want to find a new way. And so I think as we look upon them and support them, we need to be the ones that support whatever kinds of communities that they end up finding for themselves, and encourage them to do that. Because more than any particular religious worldview, it's the community that you've formed in Cambria and many, many Americans all over have formed in their hometowns. That is what brings health and happiness to individuals and heals our society. So school's done and we move on.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing your insight into our youngest generation. Normally at this time, we receive offerings from our congregants. However, due to the virtual format of this service, we invite you to make your offering that's shown on the slideshow. These methods will be posted in the newsletter and on the UUCC website itself. Please keep in mind that our congregation is entirely self-governed by the democratic process. One of the privileges of our free church tradition is to provide all the financial support for our many ministries from among ourselves. Generosity, therefore, is one of the spiritual values we recognize as central to our personal and our institutional well-being. You are invited to participate in the blessing of giving by sending us an offering. Thank you. Our thanks for all gifts given and received for the work of this community. Let us now sing the doxology.
From all that dwell below the skies, let faith and hope with love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung through every land by every tongue.
Oh, will you please join me, so we don't have to move the camera, in singing Building a New Way? It's hymn number 1017. I will start. I had too much stuff in the way. Okay. Oh, I got to move the capo. We are building a new way. We are building
right, now may we go forth from this digital world into the real world with care for the generations that come before us and the generations that come after us, and knowing that it is by holding their hands as we go through together that the health and happiness of every generation finds its fullest pathway forward. So go forth with love for all those who come before and after us.